Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Practice English TV. I'm Mark, and it's really nice to have you here with us again.
And I'm Emma. Thanks for joining us today. Wherever you are right now, maybe you're relaxing, maybe you're on your way somewhere, we're glad you're listening.
So today, we're going to talk about something that can feel a little uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Yeah, going to the doctor.
More specifically, what to say at a doctor appointment.
This is one of those real-life situations where English really matters because you need to explain how you feel clearly.
Exactly. And sometimes even simple things like describing pain or answering basic questions can feel stressful.
So today, we're going to go through real situations, natural conversations, and useful phrases to help you feel more confident.
Just listen, relax, and don't worry if you don't understand everything.
Yeah, take it step by step, and let's get into it together.
You know what's interesting about going to the doctor? It's something we all do at some point, but it can feel very different when you have to speak in English.
Yeah, especially because it's not just casual conversation. You have to explain your body, your feelings, and sometimes things that are hard to describe.
Exactly. Even simple questions like, "What's wrong?" can feel difficult if you don't know the right words.
And sometimes you're already not feeling well, so your brain is a little slower than usual.
That's a really good point. When you're sick, it's harder to think clearly.
I remember one time I had a cold, and I went to see a doctor. I knew the word throat, but in that moment, I just couldn't remember it.
That happens a lot.
Yeah, I just said, "This part hurts," and pointed to my neck.
Hey, that still works.
It does, but it made me realize how important simple vocabulary can be.
Let's imagine a basic situation. You walk into a clinic for the first time.
Right, and the first thing you usually do is check in at the front desk.
The receptionist might ask, "Do you have an appointment?"
If you do, you can say, "Yes, I have an appointment at 10 a.m."
And if you don't, you might say, "No, I'd like to see a doctor."
That's already one small moment where you need to speak clearly.
Here's another situation. You're sitting in the waiting room, and then someone calls your name.
You go into the doctor's office, and the doctor asks, "How can I help you today?"
That question sounds simple, but it can be tricky.
Yeah, because now you have to explain your problem.
You might say something like, "I have a headache," or "I feel sick."
Or maybe, "I've had a cough for 3 days."
That's a great example. You're not just saying what you feel, but also how long you've felt it.
Another small situation is when the doctor asks follow-up questions.
Like, "Does it hurt here?" or "When did it start?"
And sometimes you're not sure how to answer right away.
Yeah, you might pause, think for a second, and then answer slowly.
That's completely normal.
There's also that moment when the doctor gives instructions.
Like, take this medicine twice a day, or get some rest.
If you don't understand, it's important to ask again.
Exactly, because this is your health, so it really matters.
So even though going to the doctor is a common experience, it can feel stressful in another language.
But the good news is, the conversations are often very similar each time.
That means once you learn a few key phrases and patterns, you'll feel much more confident.
And today, we're going to help you with that step by step.
Yeah, just like a real visit to the doctor.
So don't worry if you've ever felt nervous in this situation.
You're definitely not alone.
And it's something you can improve with practice.
I remember a time when I went to the doctor, and honestly, I felt more nervous about my English than my health.
Yeah, that says a lot.
Yeah, I walked into the clinic, checked in, and everything was fine at first.
But when you sat down in the waiting room, you started thinking, what am I going to say? That moment when you start practicing sentences in your head?
Exactly. I was like, "Okay, I have a headache. I have a headache." Just repeating it quietly.
That's so real.
Then the doctor called my name, and suddenly my mind went blank.
Of course it did.
I walked in, sat down, and the doctor asked, "So, what seems to be the problem?"
Simple question, but not easy in that moment.
Yeah, and I paused, like a long pause. Then I said, "I feel not good."
That works, but yeah, not very specific.
Exactly. The doctor was nice, though. He just nodded and asked, "Can you tell me more?"
That's helpful.
So I tried again. I said, "I have, pain in my head."
That's better.
Yeah, but then he asked, "How long have you had it?" And I understood the question, but I couldn't answer right away.
That delay, where you understand but your brain needs time.
Exactly. I was thinking, how do I say this? 2 days? For 2 days? Since 2 days?
Too many options at once.
Yeah, and finally I said, "For 2 days."
That's perfect, though.
It worked, but the whole time I felt like I was moving very slowly.
I had a similar experience, but mine was a little more awkward.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I went to the doctor because I had a cough, and everything was okay at first.
Okay.
Then the doctor asked me, "Are you taking any medication?"
That's a common question.
Yeah, but I didn't understand the word medication at that time.
Oh, no.
So I just said yes.
That's always risky.
Very risky, because then he asked, "What are you taking?"
And you didn't know what to say.
Exactly. I just froze for a second and said, I don't remember the name."
That's actually a smart answer.
Yeah, I was trying to save the situation.
Let's imagine another small situation. You're at the front desk and the receptionist asks, "Can you fill out this form?"
You look at the form and there are a lot of words you don't fully understand.
You might feel a little overwhelmed.
But instead of guessing, you can ask, "Can you help me with this?"
That makes things much easier.
Here's another situation. The doctor asks, "Does it hurt when you move?"
You understand most of it, but you're not sure about move.
So you move your arm a little and say, "Yes, it hurts here."
That's a great way to combine words and actions.
All these moments feel small, but when you're there, they feel big.
Yeah, because it's your health and you want to communicate clearly.
But the important thing is even simple English works.
Exactly. You don't need perfect sentences.
You just need to be understood.
And little by little, it gets easier.
Yeah, every visit is practice.
So now that we've seen some real situations, let's slow things down and look at the key words you'll hear. Let's start with some basic words you will hear when you go to a doctor. These are simple but very important.
Yeah, once you know these words, it becomes much easier to understand what's happening.
First, let's talk about appointment. An appointment is a scheduled time to see the doctor.
So if you say, "I have an appointment at 10 a.m., it means you already booked a time.
If you don't have one, you might say, "I'd like to make an appointment."
Another important word is receptionist. This is the person at the front desk.
They help you check in and give basic information.
Now, let's look at a small situation. You walk into a clinic and go to the front desk.
You can say, "Hi, I have an appointment."
Or, "Hi, I'd like to see a doctor."
Both are natural and easy to use.
Next, let's talk about parts of the body. This is very important when you describe a problem.
Some common words are head, throat, stomach, back, and chest.
For example, you can say, "I have a headache," or "My stomach hurts."
Another useful word is pain. Pain means something hurts.
You can say, "I have pain in my back," or "There is pain in my chest."
Now, let's look at how to describe time. Doctors often ask when something started.
You might hear, "When did it start?"
You can answer, "It started yesterday," or "It started 3 days ago."
Here's a small situation. The doctor asks, "How long have you had this?"
You can say, for 2 days, or for about a week.
Simple answers are perfectly fine.
Another important word is symptom. A symptom is something you feel when you are sick.
For example, a cough, a fever, or a headache are all symptoms.
Now, let's talk about fever. A fever means your body temperature is high.
You can say, "I have a fever," or "I feel hot."
Another common word is cough. A cough is when you have trouble with your throat or breathing.
You can say, "I have a cough," or "I've been coughing a lot."
Now, let's look at one more situation. The doctor asks, "Are you allergic to anything?"
Allergic means your body reacts badly to something, like food or medicine.
You can answer, "No, I'm not allergic to anything."
Or, "Yes, I'm allergic to penicillin," for example.
Another useful word is medicine. This is what the doctor gives you to help you feel better.
The doctor might say, "Take this medicine twice a day."
Twice a day means 2 times a day.
If you're not sure, you can always ask, "Do you mean 2 times a day?"
That's a very good way to check.
So even with simple words like these, you can handle most situations at a doctor appointment.
You don't need a lot of vocabulary. You just need the right words.
And now, let's try using these words in a real conversation.
Let's walk through a full situation again, but this time let's make it a bit more real. Not perfect, not smooth, just like real life.
Yeah, because real conversations are never perfect.
So, you're not feeling well. Maybe you have a headache and a sore throat. You decide to go to a clinic.
Okay, I walk in, go to the front desk, and the receptionist looks at me.
They say, "Hi, how can I help you?"
I say, "Hi, I have an appointment at 10 a.m.
Good. Then they ask, "Can I have your name and date of birth?"
I say my name, but then when I say my birthday, I get a little nervous and say it too fast.
Yeah, that happens.
So the receptionist says, "Sorry, can you repeat that?"
And you repeat it a little slower this time.
Yeah, and this time it's clear.
Then they say, "Please have a seat."
So I sit down, and now I start thinking again.
Practicing sentences in your head?
Yes, I have a headache, I have a sore throat, over and over.
Then your name is called and you go into the doctor's room.
The doctor smiles and says, "Hi, what seems to be the problem?"
And this is the moment.
Yeah, I pause for a second and say, "I don't feel very well."
That's a natural start.
Then I add, "I have a headache and a sore throat."
Good, clear, and simple.
Then the doctor asks, "How long have you had these symptoms?"
And what happens?
I understand the question, but I need a second to think.
That's very normal.
So I say, for 2 days."
Perfect.
Then the doctor asks, "Do you have a fever?"
And maybe you don't catch the word fever clearly.
Yeah, I hesitate and say, "Sorry, fever?"
And the doctor repeats a bit slower, "Do you feel hot, high temperature?"
Then I understand and say, "Oh, yes, a little."
That's a great recovery.
Then the doctor checks my throat and listens to my breathing.
Everything feels okay so far.
Then suddenly the doctor asks, "Are you taking any medication?"
And this is where things get tricky.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand medication.
So what do you do?
This time I don't guess. I say, "Sorry, what does medication mean?"
That's exactly the right move.
The doctor says, "Medicine. Are you taking any medicine right now?"
And now it's clear.
So I say, "No, I'm not taking anything."
Good.
Then the doctor says, "I'll give you some medicine."
And explains how to take it.
They say, "Take this twice a day."
Now, here's another small moment.
Yeah, I understand, but I want to be sure.
So you ask?
Sorry, do you mean 2 times a day?
Perfect.
The doctor says, yes, morning and evening.
Now everything is clear.
Here's one more moment. The doctor speaks a little fast at the end.
That happens a lot.
So instead of just saying, okay, I stop and say, sorry, can you repeat that more slowly?
That's really important.
The doctor repeats, slower this time, and now I understand.
And you feel more confident.
Yeah, much better.
Then the doctor finishes and says, get some rest and drink plenty of water.
I say, thank you, and leave.
And that's the full experience with all the small, real moments.
Not perfect, a little slow, a little awkward, but completely okay.
Exactly. That's what real communication looks like.
And once you go through it a few times, it becomes much easier.
Yeah, it's just practice.
So now, let's look at some useful phrases you can use in these situations.
You know, instead of just listing phrases, I think it's more helpful if we actually say them like we would in real life.
Yeah, because that's how people remember them better, not as a list, but as part of a conversation.
So imagine you're sitting in front of the doctor and they ask, what seems to be the problem?
I'd probably say, I don't feel very well. I have a headache.
That sounds very natural. You can also add a little more detail if you want.
Yeah, maybe something like, I have a headache and I feel really tired.
Exactly. Simple but clear.
And if it's something like a cough, I might say, I've been coughing a lot.
That I've been structure is very useful.
Yeah, it shows that something started in the past and is still happening.
Now the doctor might ask, how long have you had this?
I'd say, for about 3 days.
Or even, since Monday.
Yeah, both work.
Here's a small situation. The doctor asks you something, but you don't understand.
Instead of guessing, I'd say, sorry, can you repeat that?
That's probably one of the most important phrases.
Yeah, and sometimes I say, sorry, I didn't catch that.
Very natural.
If I still don't understand, I might say, what does that mean?
That's a great follow-up.
Now, let's imagine the doctor asks, does it hurt here, and points to a place.
You can say, yes, it hurts there.
Or, no, it doesn't hurt there, it hurts here, and point to a different spot.
That combination of speaking and pointing is very helpful.
Yeah, you don't need perfect words.
Now another moment. The doctor says, I'm going to give you some medicine.
At that point, I usually want to ask a question.
Like what?
Something simple, like, how often should I take it?
That's a great question.
Or, should I take this with food?
Very useful.
Here's another situation. The doctor explains something but speaks a little fast.
That happens a lot.
So I might say, can you say that more slowly?
That's polite and clear.
Or even, can you explain that again?
That's another good one.
Now, let's imagine the doctor gives you instructions like, take this twice a day.
And you want to be sure.
So I say, do you mean 2 times a day?
Perfect. That's how you confirm.
Because with medicine, you don't want to guess.
Exactly.
Here's one more small moment. You're about to leave, but you still feel unsure about something.
What would you say?
I might say, can I ask one more question?
That's very natural and polite.
Then I ask whatever I need.
And at the end, you can say, thank you, doctor.
Or, thank you for your help.
Simple, but respectful.
I think the most important thing is this.
You don't need perfect English.
Yeah, you just need clear communication.
Even simple sentences can do the job.
Exactly. And the more you use these phrases, the more natural they'll feel.
So now, let's finish with a few simple tips to help you feel more confident. Before we finish today, I want to share a few simple ideas that can really help you feel more confident when you go to a doctor appointment.
Yeah, nothing complicated, just small things that can make a big difference when you're actually there.
First, give yourself time. If you need a moment to think, that's completely okay.
You don't have to answer immediately. A short pause is normal, even for native speakers.
And if you feel stuck, just start simple.
Yeah, even something like, I don't feel well is a perfect beginning.
From there, you can add more.
Like, I have a headache, or I've been coughing.
Exactly. Simple but clear. Another helpful idea is to listen for patterns.
Doctors often ask the same kinds of questions.
Like, how long have you had this? Or, do you have a fever?
Once you hear these a few times, they start to feel familiar.
Here's a small situation. The doctor says something, but you don't understand.
Instead of guessing, you stop and say, sorry, can you repeat that?
That one sentence can change everything.
Yeah, it turns confusion into clarity.
Another situation, you understand, but you're not completely sure.
So you say, do you mean 2 times a day?
That's how you protect yourself from mistakes.
Especially with medicine, it's important to be clear.
Another simple tip is to prepare a little before you go.
You can think about how to describe your problem in 1 or 2 sentences.
For example, I have a sore throat, or my stomach hurts.
And also think about time.
Like, it started yesterday, or for 3 days.
This makes everything smoother when you're actually there.
Now let's talk about practice.
You don't have to wait until you're sick to practice this.
You can practice at home in a very simple way.
Just imagine a situation.
And say something like, I have a headache.
Or, I've had a fever for 2 days.
These small habits build confidence over time.
Now we have a question for you.
Think about the last time you felt sick.
What did you feel?
Try to answer in English, even if it's just one sentence.
You can say, I had a cough and a fever.
Or, I had a headache for 2 days.
That's already great practice.
And here's something important to remember.
Your English doesn't need to be perfect for you to take care of yourself.
Even simple English can help you explain your problem and get the help you need.
And every time you try, you get a little better.
So don't be afraid of these situations.
They're not just challenges, they're also opportunities to grow.
Thanks for spending time with us today.
We really hope this helped you feel a little more ready and a little more confident.
Take care of yourself, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye for now, and keep practicing.